Good morning, and thank you for joining us on Friday's episode of the Roundtable Talk Show. Today has been an interesting morning, too much to go into, but guess what? It's Friday and TGIF. Thank God it's Friday. We've had an amazing show with some amazing guests. We've learned so much, and we are going to have some fun today to take you into the weekend. I'm your host, Sharifa Hardy, and I'm going to go ahead and introduce you to today's guest. Our first guest is Mr. Jay Schiffman. Jay is a writer, a speaker, a consultant. He's a coach. He is an advocate, and he helps people with mental health. His mission is let's talk about mental health. Good morning, Jay. How are you?
Morning. Thank you for having me here. This is great.
You are welcome. I want to see your shirt a little bit. Sit back. Yes, let's talk about mental health. And during these trying times, I know that's something that we definitely need to speak about. Our next guest is Alissa Musto, and she is a musician. She's a singer, and she's been singing since she was knee-high to a grasshopper. Good morning, Alissa. How are you?
I couldn't have put it better myself. I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me. And yeah, I'm excited to get to know everybody and do this thing.
You are so welcome. I think music is our theme, and the music played right in with the mental health and what's going on because we have Ainsley Ross, and Ainsley's a musician as well. And you've been into music since a young age as well. Good morning, Ainsley. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm blessed to be here, and I'm excited to get to know all of y'all as well, and looking forward to just keeping it real and talking about how we can make the world a better place. And I feel like it's all starts right here, just talking with each other. So thank you for having me on, guys.
You're welcome. Thank you for joining us. I definitely agree. So we have music to lift our spirits. We're taking a look at how it affects us in our mental health. And then our next guest, Mr. Ron Blake, who ties right in with everything else. He's also an activist, but he works with people with PTSD, sexual abuse, and that all ties into what we're talking about today. Good morning, Ron. How are you?
Good morning. You're the first person I've talked to today. Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
I just had to laugh because one of the things that I learned during this process is our verbiage has changed. We were talking about how one of the guests kept saying, I had to make a supply run. I had to make a supply run. And I said, Chad was his name. I said, Chad, didn't we used to call that going to the grocery store? And now it's like Rod, the first thing he says is like, you're the first person I talked to today.
I mean, honestly, I'm impressed with myself that I'm still able to formulate full sentences. Being in isolation for the last 3 weeks where you really don't have to be talking to anyone. So I've heard myself, I was like, wow, we still know how to do that. That's great.
Right? Pre-quarantine life. Those were the good old days. It's kind of funny that we get excited to go to the grocery store now. Obviously, it's like it's little things for sure.
Yes. That's one of the things that we've been talking about, because initially I was like, what am I going to talk about? What am I going to discuss? Should I ask questions? Should I bring in topics? And what actually happened was COVID-19 hit. And that was the only thing people were talking about. And I said, you know what? Let's use this as an opportunity to do something that's positive. Let's talk to a whole bunch of people and find out what they're doing during this time. What are some strategies? What are some tips? What are some advice, some guidance that we can pass on to our viewers to help them through this situation? So Jay, I wanted to start with you. And the typical question that I ask is, what is your business? What do you do? And what's the difference between how you operated that and how you're operating now?
Well, that's wonderful. And that's actually what I've been talking to a lot of people about recently, is how this has changed the way that we are operating. A lot of what I do normally is speaking, a lot of public speaking. I'm 10 years in recovery. And so a lot of my stories, a lot of what I do revolves around my personal struggles with addiction. the public speaking piece is just no longer there. I've done a couple of online things, and that's still possible, but that's just not going to carry it the way that it used to. The rest of my business is writing. I do coaching and consulting with businesses about their mental health work for their employees. And very luckily for me, because I need a constant outlet, I started a podcast in February when it looked like this was going to be as bad as it ended up being, called the Choose Your Struggle podcast, where I talk about some of these issues as well. But a couple weeks into this, in early March, I was still trying to do business as usual, and it very quickly dawned on me that that's just not possible. And so what I started doing instead was posting online about how I was simply going to be here for anyone who needed someone to talk to. As some of our guests have said before, this is something that's falling away. People don't have that interaction. And the thing that I've found is just posting that, saying, hey, I'm here. A lot of people have come out of the woodwork just wanting a non-judgmental ear. The most common thing I've had, and I've had countless people call me Zoom conferences, is that they feel that they can't have their normal feelings anymore. Yes, it feels weird to kind of complain about your job when 1 in 3 people either has already lost their job or their job is in danger of going away. And that's very normal to feel afraid of saying those feelings, but it doesn't make your job less annoying. So a lot of people have reached out just saying, can I complain to you? Can you just sit there and listen? And that has been the piece of my business. I'm not making money off it. I'm just doing it for free to help people, trying to add value to people's lives and help in any way I can. And, the podcast is still the business piece, and I'm really enjoying doing that. But just being there for people is what's made me the happiest in this period.
I think that's wonderful. I was reading an article the other day about Ellen, and Ellen got a lot of flack. I don't know if anyone saw it, but she made a comment on social media about how this quarantine is like being in prison. And sometimes it's like the simplest things, or the things that you may not, think are that important, will set people off, because they're like, okay, Ellen, right, like you're in this multi-million-dollar home, being able to do whatever it is you want to do, and you're comparing your life to prisoners. And she actually received a lot of controversy just because of that statement. But it's all how we look at it. It's all our perspective. It's all how we see things. So that's definitely an interesting point. Before COVID-19, were you going to office, or were you at home? What was that aspect like?
So I'm very lucky that, I work for myself. And so my business is something I can do anywhere. The piece that, like I said, has disappeared is the speaking part, where I would obviously go, or the consulting piece where I was going to businesses and helping them with their mental health. But the coaching, I've always done, meeting people where they are. So that piece hasn't changed as much. Although personally, I got to say, kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, I know it's selfish. I miss coffee shops. I love my wife and my dog very much. I love working from home. My wife works from home already, so this hasn't really changed her life. But personally, I miss going to a coffee shop, putting my headphones in and getting some work done. It was a hard adjustment for me. And I will very much look forward to doing that again when we're allowed to go out.
Yes. So let me ask you, because you mentioned your wife and you work from home, your wife works at home. One of the things that we've been discussing is this kind of stir crazy aspect. I don't know if it's just me. Again, this is why I wanted a panel or the round table. Somebody helped me with this, but I had at least 3 friends who either wanted to get a divorce or wanted to break up. And I was like, okay, this is not a really good time for that. You know what I mean? This is the time to stick together, work it out. Was it just me, or did anybody else notice like this pattern of, look, I just want out of this situation?
Yeah, I mean, when this whole thing first started happening, I thought about that. Working on the cruise ships, we always make a joke like, oh, some of these longer cruises, people are going to leave these things divorced because they're not used to spending 24/7 with the spouse. And that was the same thing going on with this quarantine. I was like, this is going to be the decline of a lot of relationships, a lot of marriage. And also, like, I feel right now for people with kids, because people are used to going to their jobs and dropping their kids off at school. Now they're spending like every waking moment with their entire family unit, which, I don't care how much you love your family, no one's prepared for that.
Oh yeah, and I completely agree, like with what you said. A lot of people, it's all about perspective, and it's all about how we look at it, but also people's mental health as well, and being with their family 24/7. But I feel bad for the child abuse rates that are going to go up if a kid is in an abusive home. Sadly, like, school was their only outlet. They don't have that outlet right now. They have to do it from home. And, people are learning, kind of relearning in a way, how to work as a family unit. And that can either be a good thing and a bad thing. But sadly, I do feel like that we will see more an incline of divorce and child abuse and things that, we're just going to have to figure out how to be there for them right now as much as we can, and in the future. And I feel like, how blessed are we that technology is on our side at this moment, and that we can really be there as much as we can.
And on the other side of things too, I know, obviously there's a lot of negatives, but for myself, I found like this is the first time in the last 10 years of my life, probably for the last time, all of my adult siblings and my parents were all living together again under the same roof. We're back at my childhood house. We're all sitting down having dinner together. Like, it's been a decade since that happened. And I've been thinking about it, and it's really nice to have those moments again, because other than this time in my life, I don't know when we'll have another time where we're all living together again. So I've really grown to, as much as they're driving me crazy sometimes, I really cherish those moments, because that was something I just never thought I would have again, especially being on the road most of the time. It's crazy being home.
Oh yeah. It reminds you of the things that we do have in this life, and like, the quality time. I feel like all of us, in this day and age, like, social media is a huge asset, yes, but I also feel like it makes us think about the perspective of how much we really need to cherish physical social interaction, and how that void, it can't be filled. Like, I need to see you. I'm spending quality time with my family, and we're playing games, and that's something that it really makes you value and cherish those little things, so you can carry that on to your family or the life that you want in your future. So 100% right there with you.
That is beautiful. Ron, how has this affected you and your business?
Oh, a lot. I told somebody the other day, I said, I don't know if there's anybody in America that has been impacted as badly in a certain way as me. Because for 1,590 days in a row, for 4 to 8 hours each one of those days, I've gone out, and I meet total strangers. That's been my therapy to get through PTSD and the trauma that almost took my life. Until I get to this symbolic goal, I promised I would keep meeting strangers. So I've met one by one around this country and in Mexico. I've walked up to 32,058 strangers and started a conversation for 5, 10, sometimes 2, 3 hours with them. They sign support on these boards I carry around. They share their stories. So for me, I mean, if you could imagine spending 12,000 hours of your life to try and get to a goal for 5 minutes, but it all centers around meeting people. And when this happened a few weeks ago, I told myself, what am I going to do now? I can't go out and meet strangers. And there were a lot of friends and people that have followed my journey for years that said, what are you going to do now? And I just decided I'm going to start sharing videos on Instagram. So every day I make a 1-minute video. And what's interesting about that is I pull a message or a story that somebody put on one of the boards that helped me get through my trauma. And I start sharing that with people in a 1-minute video every day. And I told people, keep coming back here. I'll share something. So in some ways, I feel like these 32,000 plus strangers have prepared me for this moment to like help everybody else. And actually what I'm doing, like I said, is pulling all these messages off the boards and sharing. And it's been fun. I try to keep it really lighthearted. I told people recently too, that don't focus on what you don't have right now. Focus on what you do have, because that's what's going to get you through this. And if we continuously look at life is a prison, life is bad, life is that becomes your reality. And there was a Star Wars quote I read the other day. It said, your focus becomes your reality. One of the Jedi masters told Anakin that before his pod race. And it's so powerful. So I thought maybe throwing in a little entertainment value is talking about something that people can relate to. Star Wars will help us get through it. So it has been hard for me just because people have been my lifeline, but I'm finding a way to still stay connected to people. And I mean, that's what we have to do. I mean,
Yeah.
it's either do or don't do, and I'm doing it. So I'm trying to find a way through this.
What's your Instagram, Ron? Where can we find you?
Oh yeah, I should probably go to that chat section. It's just at Blake Late Show. Just my name, Blake. And then yes, the big goal is I'm trying to get on the Late Show with Stephen Colbert. And there's a whole explanation. There's something very symbolic that happened one night that involved this guy named Stephen Colbert and his show. But yeah, it's at Blake Late Show.
Dude, I love to hear the Stephen Colbert story.
Oh, it starts off sadly, and it was about 4.5 years ago. I woke up from a nightmare. I had been struggling really badly. I almost lost my life one night when 3 men came into my home. I was held down. I was sexually assaulted. They did horrific things to me before all the police came to help. So I often would have nightmares. And on one night, November of 2015, I woke up from this nightmare. I was done, and I was ready to take my life. People that don't understand that have never been in that kind of pain. And I was in a lot of pain, and I got the pills out, and for some reason I looked up at the TV, and the TV was still on, which surprised me. It should have gone off that night. But for some reason, the Late Show with Stephen Colbert, he's a comedian, it was on, and I laughed. I have no something made me laugh that night, and I paused the show, and I always thought it was a sign. And I leave it up to people, whether that was the universe or a higher power. I have my beliefs as to what happened, but that night I paused the show and I said, I'm getting on this show someday. I will tell my story before I leave this earth. And the way it all started, the next day when I woke up, I went to a Staples store. I saw some giant foam. I was there to buy paper, but I saw these giant foam poster boards, and a woman came up and said, can I help you? And I said, do you have more of these in the back? And she went to go look, and she came back and said, how many do you want? And I never said I wanted any. I was just curious. And that's the moment, the epiphany. And I said, this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to get people to sign these boards. It'll show that I've talked to them, tell them I want to get on the we'll see if we'll start building support. And it's just, yeah. And I got Sharpie markers that day, and this thing took off. I mean, it's just, I have almost 500 giant foam poster boards. It's incredible. But that's why the Late Show with Stephen Colbert is so symbolic for me. And people along the way, they're saying that they have symbolic goals too. This just happens to be mine. And it happens to be a very hard show to get on because I'm not a celebrity. And this guy is usually all about celebrity guests. He's not like Ellen. She'll have a lot more people on. And it doesn't mean I don't want to get on Ellen. If somebody wanted to get me on Ellen, great. But the last question I'm going to ask Ellen is, can you help me get on the Late Show? Because that was what was simple. So anyway, that's why he's important. It's going to last all of 5 minutes, and I spent 12,000 hours to get on this show, but that's okay. I encourage other people. We should all, whatever all of us want to do in our life, we should all get behind each other. And I think that's the thing, is that we're here to support each other. So I think this COVID-19 crisis is teaching us that even more.
100%.
That is
Wow.
amazing.
Well put, Ron. That was beautiful.
That was powerful and so meaningful. And you know what? Congratulations on where you're at in your life. Like, congratulations to you and all of your hard work. You should feel so proud of yourself and the impact that you're making on everyone's lives. Because without you, how could you have touched others in the way that you wanted to feel? And by meeting new strangers, you are sharing your story and your testament, encouraging them to pursue theirs and to follow their hearts and their dreams, and that they matter. So just congratulations to you. That is amazing what you're doing.
Yeah, thanks. And people have become incredibly vulnerable with me, but vulnerability begets vulnerability. And I was actually shocked in the first couple of weeks how much people started telling me, and I was like, why are they telling me this? But not in a bad way. I was just really surprised. And a lot of experts said, you're a stranger. They don't feel like you're going to judge them. And you've told them a lot of things about you. So there are a lot of messages on Instagram that I keep their names private. I'll just say, this one is not anonymous, but I'm going to keep this woman or this man's name private. And I'll read the message that they left or the story. But it's just because their story is so powerful. But yeah, so people, Well, like you guys, you're listening, so I appreciate that. You're the first people of the day that have listened to me, so this is exciting.
It feels like you're on a different planet. Like we're all on these different planets, and we're
Right.
like, hey, look, there are people. There are actually other people out there that are alive. I appreciate it, Ron. Thank you for sharing your story. When I asked, I had no idea it was that emotional. It was this story. So thank you for being vulnerable. Um, when you mentioned the universe, yeah, all y'all making me emotional. This is a Friday show. We're talking about mental health and PTSD and how we're helping people. But you mentioned the universe, and I feel, and I've been seeing that certain people, certain guests tend to line up with each other. I don't know why that is. That is the universe or life or God or whatever you want to call it. But I don't plan it like that. In certain days, the guests will be all a certain type of people. Like today, mental health. PTSD. But then we just so happen to have two people who are musicians here as well. And I know when you talk about mental health, it's always that fine line between genius and insanity. And you have a lot of musicians who suffer from mental health because they feel the music, they hear the music, and to other people it's not always real. When you were speaking, Ainsley, definitely I felt the emotion. How do you use music to heal or to help other people?
Mhm. Yes, ma'am. I love that question, first of all. For me, music is my outlet. Any song that I write, anything that I put out into the world, universe, God, whatever it is for you, anything I put out there, I see as a true reflection of what you cultivate in your own life and once you get back, and they should be used as words of healing instead of words of belittlement or, controversy or, and by using your lyrics for positivity as a songwriter and any movie soundtrack you write for or any song that I've produced and brought to life, it's like a baby. And I know you feel the same way as well about your music. It's like it's one of those things that you want to use to reach someone. So my emotion that goes in it, even when it's in pain, even when I am sad or I'm angry and I write that song, I try to let the roots and rawness and realness of that song transcend into my lyrics. So even though you may hear a lyric that's like, man, I'm down at this moment, but this will propel me to bring myself back up. It always has a positive outlook for that mental health, for the people who need to hear music to cultivate their own emotions and to feel what they need to feel, but realize it's okay for you to feel and be in a moment, but you cannot waller in that moment. And you have to see the light at that end of the tunnel. So as an artist, as a musician, yes, I do. I feel all the emotions and I'm very connected. I'm a person that wears my heart on my sleeve. So it's just, really filtering through what life throws at you. And I feel it's all in how you handle it. And it's all in what you create to help others better themselves. So for me, I hope that answered your question. That's how I feel like you can use the emotions and impact others, but I choose to impact others in a positive way because we need a little bit more positivity.
Yeah, and I love how you bring up, it's definitely a two-way street. Like
It is.
as a performer, as an artist, from the time I was a kid, that's how I expressed myself. When I was feeling something, whether it was happy, sad, or somewhere in between, my music was my outlet and the way that, I could, share what I was feeling and help me get through something. But I always say, the most rewarding part of being a performer, of being an artist, is when people tell you, hey, your music helped me get through something. I was going through a hard time. I had a tough day. This has been a really crazy time in my life. And for that moment, you helped me. And, and those are the moments that we hear about. And I'm sure, Ron, the same for you. I'm sure when you have conversations with people, they're helping you get through something, but you don't even realize what you're doing for them. It's a two-way street. And I've had people tell me that, I remember being so selfish. I were feeling so selfish. I was at a dinner and I looked at my watch and I realized I was running late for my show. And I was like kind of annoyed. And I had to rush back, get ready for the show, walked on stage like 2 minutes before it was supposed to start. Thought no one cared, like it was gonna be whatever. And at the end of the show, this man came up to me and he was crying. His family was crying because he had Alzheimer's, yet he was singing along to all of the words from these old tunes from the 60s, and his family was saying certain songs brought back memories for him. And I always remember that experience because, that was one that I had heard about. You don't know when you're performing for people, how many people are experiencing something and you don't even realize it. And it's just always a reminder to myself that, even though I could be annoyed or I might be, that's not what I want to be doing at the moment or somewhere in between, there's always someone in a worse situation than you that you are helping out without even realizing it.
Amen. Amen to what you said, girl. Exactly. I mean, I feel that same connection, and I feel like every artist feels that in their hearts at some point where, like you said, there's a moment where, you're in a rush, you're getting ready, you have to be, deadlines are like that, and
like it is, as much as we say, like it's our art, it's also, our job.
Exactly.
Career, logistical, like non-fun parts of it, like any job, any
job. Yeah, there's the glamorous moments that you see, and there's the moments where you're warming up your vocals or you get a cold or something right in between. So, but completely, it's the little moments I feel like that humble us as artists every day in every show where, you're blessed to be doing what you're doing, but you get in a routine and you're like, okay, we're going to go do this. This is how it's going to go. Right. And then it's always that fan or that friend or that family member that approaches you in the beginning or the end. And they're like, man, you really don't know how much that song has changed my life, or you don't know how much your energy inspired me. And it's always so humbling, and it warms your heart because you're in the right place and you're doing the right thing.
You're doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Exactly.
Like, what you were put on this earth to do.
And no matter the things that you've been through,
those moments definitely solidify that and confirm that, and best feeling in the world.
It's beautiful. I believe that music definitely lifts our spirits, and it helps us definitely with our mental health. I want to go back to Jay. One of the things that you mentioned as a consultant is you work with corporations or companies with their employees and their mental health. Some companies outsource it, and you have the internal aspects of the company who works with it. But with everything going on in the world, COVID-19, I read something the other day. I'm in Long Beach, California. There were over 300,000 unemployment claims in one day. People are losing things. People are unable to return to their new norm, and they're going through it. What are some of the advice for companies that you can give for their employees that are going through this situation, Jay?
Well, that's a very important topic. Before that, I do want to thank our two musicians for what they just said. The music piece is so important. It's actually a thing that I work on with my coaching clients. There's a skill that we talk about, which is doing a mental intake inspection, which is basically what are you allowing into your brain, and music is a big part of that. And personally, I am a huge fan of the rap group Migos, but I know if after I listen to them, I'm in a certain place and probably not the most calm place, right? So not saying I don't love it. I love Migos, but it's not the best for my mental health. So I actually built a playlist on Spotify called Positive Mental Health. It's open. People have contributed to it as well. And it's just songs to make you feel good. And it's something I recommend to clients. If you're in a tough spot, if you need to kind of bring it in a little bit, put that on. It's something that can really help you recenter. So
give us a song from the list, Jay.
I'm sorry?
Give us a song from the list.
Oh man, so many. I'll tell you what, it goes everywhere from Rihanna to Al Green to some Kanye. I mean, there's a lot of great music on there. So, and I mean it when I say I want people to contribute. So if there's something that makes you feel good, throw it on there and help some other people out, because there's so much great music out there that we may not know something that really will resonate with us until you hear it. So definitely check that out. But the business piece, I think, is crazy important. I'll tell you my favorite story about that I tell all the time because it makes me laugh. I was working with a business who approached me and they said, we do mental health really well at work. I said, that's awesome. Tell me about it. And they said, well, every other Friday we bring in a therapy dog. I was like, oh, that's so cool. What else are you guys doing? Like, oh, no, that's it. And it's like, Look, don't get rid of the dog. The dog is great, but let's also do some stuff on top of that. And I think something Ron said earlier is so key to that, and that is the empathy piece, and that is the vulnerability piece. We all know those bosses who go into work, they shut their door, and then they come out at the end of the day and they leave. Like, they may as well not be there, right? But the good leaders are the ones that are interacting with their community at work, the ones that are being open, the ones that are being vulnerable themselves. And as Ron said so perfectly, that vulnerability begets more vulnerability. And people can feel more connected at work if they feel that they're valued as a complete person and not just a cog in the wheel. And so that's something I talk about a lot with business leaders is, look, this comes from you. You know, you can set all the best mental health practices at work, but if you aren't following them yourselves, people see that and they know that they're coming into work at a place that does not value them as a complete person. Now, obviously, there is a limit. We don't want people bringing everything into work because, you know, these people, this is still a workplace, but there is a line that a lot of people won't even approach at all. And we need to do better about being people at work and not just, you know, mindless drones going in, because at the end of the day, we're spending just as much time, if not more, with our coworkers and our work family as we are with our actual family. That's just the way our work environment is in our country. So if you're not feeling accepted, if you're not feeling healthy at work, it's going to show up.
Yes, but I think I think everything you said was wonderful. I think it was great. I loved it. Now in COVID-19, you have a lot of people, especially I'm reading articles on essential workers and their mental health, you know, because it's bad enough when you're forced to be at home, but I have to be at home. Yes, I'm a recluse. I'm used to working at home. I've been working at home for years. It's nothing for me to stay in the house. I'm more surprised when I go out and I see everyone in these face masks. I'm like, okay, wait, where am I? But you have these essential employees, they still have to go out. They still have to work. You have your nurses, your doctors, your grocery store workers, you know, your McDonald's employees, they have to go to work. So I'm pretty sure there's a different, you know, aspect of mental health for them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that it's if there was ever a time for businesses to double down and support for those people, now is that time. You know, you're seeing a lot of places who are opening up more resources, especially the telemedicine route. But at the same time, it takes that business making that decision. There was a survey I read not long ago that basically it boiled down HR professional, the average HR professional does not feel confident talking to their employees about mental health in the way that they do about physical health. You know, if an employee breaks their leg, the HR person's right there, like, all right, here's how we can accommodate you. But an employee struggling with mental health issues, that HR person is kind of going, I'm sorry, I don't really know what to do here. That's okay. That's not, you know, does not have to be part of your job. There are people that can help with that. So as this time where everybody, it used to be 1 in 5. That was the estimation, that 1 in 5 Americans struggle with mental health. Mental Health America just came out with a new estimate, and it's 1 in 2 right now, because everyone is on edge. Everyone is uncertain. So it's really going to have to take these businesses, the McDonald's of the world, saying, we have to make you come to work. That's just how this is. But in exchange, here's, you know, free mental health care. You can call in and tell a doctor, whatever that they decide to do. We recommend you do this, and we're also going to pay for it. That's the biggest part, because if someone just says, here, go do this, I mean, if I'm making $5 or $10 an hour, I'm probably not going to do it. But if they say, here, go do this, and we're going to cover this for you, then there's no reason not to. I mean, yes, stigma still exists, and that's something I deal with all the time. But when it's in your own home, it's just one-on-one. You know, I get a lot of people who reach out and talk to me, and they're like, you know, maybe I should start seeing a therapist. And I always say yes. I never want to replace your therapist, and I am always going to recommend that you see a trained medical professional. It's just my belief that they can help. So now is that time where businesses need to lean hard in that direction and make it free. Insurances aren't doing it. That's just the case in this country. Insurance is not covering mental health the way they should. So it's up to companies, especially in this trying time, to do so.
Yes, well said, well said. I want to go over to you, Ron. I know your focus is on PTSD and trauma, and you walk around speaking to different people and meeting different people. I think as a people, we tend to believe that the only people that suffer from PTSD have been in the military. I, for one, believe that everyone alive has experienced some sort of PTSD. And one of the main problems is that we go through a trauma, we go through something that affects us, but we usually don't have the luxury of just taking the time out to deal with it emotionally. What happens is, just like performers and musicians, is like, you got to get back on the road. You have a show lined up. You can't just take time to grieve. Other employees, they're like, okay, even if it's a bereavement, something that affects them, you got 3 days and then you're back to work. We don't take the time. But you, I'm sure, deal with a lot of different vets, and vets are one of the ones that are affected the most by PTSD. They have a very high rate of homelessness, and that's the issue when everybody else is quarantined and everybody else has to stay at home. What do you do with people who are homeless and affected by PTSD? Do you have any words of advice, tips, strategies that can be used during these situations, Ron?
Well, I mean, for anybody, what we have to keep doing as a community, we're all this big community, all of us. We have to keep reaching out to people. We can't sit there. If we have brothers and sisters in this world that are struggling, then we're struggling. A lot of times we don't get that. This whole COVID-19 situation is allowing us to see that, because if all the grocery store workers started staying home, we'd have a much bigger problem. Or if sanitation workers started staying home, I mean, who's going to be picking up all this trash? Who's going to be taking care of cleaning these office spaces that people have to go in for essential jobs? So we are starting to actually realize, I believe, with this, that we're all in this together. This is actually really, really helping us see that. So I guess the advice I would have for people is just start realizing that people that might have apparently looked invisible to you, they're now starting to show up to be very essential in your life. And I think that's important, that we're starting to see that it's prioritizing for us. There's nobody more important in this world. There just isn't. And I think that's the best thing I'm seeing from the COVID-19 situation, is that we are seeing that these are our brothers and sisters. And it's very humbling for even for Ellen DeGeneres to make that comment she said. And even though, when you said she got a lot of sort of haters that came out and yelled at her, but you know what? But that's her reality. So maybe she's struggling in that way. And yes, she has this huge palatial place she lives in, but she's struggling, and we shouldn't diminish that. If she's struggling, let's meet her where she's at and say, okay, why are you struggling? I got some friends over here living in a 400 square foot place. There are 2 of them. They got their dog, and it's tiny, but they're not struggling, but we're all different. And so maybe that's helping us to understand that. So I'm glad that Ellen talked about that, because now we can open up and say, okay, explain a little bit more, instead of castigating her and coming after her. So, it affects all of us in some way, shape, or form. It doesn't matter it's making us realize who we all are, and we have to meet each other where we're at. And I think with like PTSD, I've had people look at me, and sadly, I've had some people that have known me for years and said, come on, man, you went through a trauma. There are people that have went through many worse traumas than you. It's time to move on, pal. I've known you for years. I want the best for you. And I thought, people told me later on, they said, don't answer people like that. That's not what you need to be hearing, because your trauma is your own. And each one of us, if we have a trauma, that is our trauma. And so it may appear to some other people to be minor, but it's our trauma. And at that moment, it may be the most important thing in our life. So we should never downplay anybody. So, I mean, this journey has helped me understand that so well. And again, this whole crisis is exposing a lot of good things. Even if they're bad, it's helping me understand that it's maybe a perspective I never looked into before. So I hope that answers your question. I probably went on 12 tangents there, but
I love tangents. The roundtable was all about tangents, and I'm listening to you, and I'm just like, I just want to cry almost. I feel like every morning from now on, I'm going to call Ron, like, good morning, Ron. I just want you to know that I'm out there. Like, that's the feeling that everything you just said just gave me.
Yes, Ron, and I completely agree with you. Like, a struggle does not diminish a struggle. And I think we should keep that in mind, and we should remember that, like, every struggle that everyone has and everything that everyone is going through, that does not compete with others. Everybody has their own Goliaths, of what I like to call it in life. They have their own giant, right? And everyone has that. it doesn't mean that one's bigger than another. Just because I'm 5 feet tall and I see someone who's, 7 feet tall, it's going to be different to everyone. Whereas y'all may be like, oh, that's not that big. It's not that, it is to me. And that's what.
Not to interrupt you, and I'm sure, Jay can probably comment more on this, but, it also brings up the fact that like mental health issues don't discriminate. And you look at people sometimes and they're like, well, they have a ton of money, or they have this perfect family life, or they have a great job, or they travel, or they have these things. What could possibly be, wrong with their lives? And I think, we all have our battles, and we all deal with those in different ways. But just because somebody may have something on the outside that others are envious are, that doesn't make them immune to mental health issues, or to PTSD, or to trauma. And I'm sure, like I said, I'm sure Jay, you probably have a lot more experience with that, and people kind of being like embarrassed by their mental health status, because they feel like there's other people that are less fortunate, or suffering more than they are.
Yeah, well, first off, Ron, you're the man. And Ron, I when we're done here, let's chat. I would love to get you on my podcast, and your story is incredible. So thank you for sharing. Yeah, I think you make a really great point that, we understand things. The way our brain works is that we understand things by relating it to our previous experience, right? So we understand someone else's struggle by how it means to us. So I went through, my struggles with addiction, and someone may not quite, of course, they're not going to get that if they haven't also struggled with that. Right. But that also means that we then tend to doubt people and go, oh, well, that doesn't sound that traumatizing. Like, I've been through something similar, but that's just not how that stuff works. We are affected by similar things in very different ways. So what may cause trauma to me will not cause trauma to Ron. And that's essentially what we're learning now. And I think you made a really great point. I apologize, whoever made this earlier, that, we see this way more in soldiers because war is war. But there are people who are on the same front lines who come back in very different states of mind because of how this traumatizing experience affected them personally. And we are now learning this, but for a long time, that was the belief of, that doesn't sound like that traumatizing. I don't really think that you have. And Ron, I'm so sorry that you had to go through that, man, that people had to tell you, I've had the same thing, that being not obviously your experience, but being someone in recovery, we think we know what recovery means because our uncle was an alcoholic, or, we struggled with whatever the case is. But every experience is different. And we in the recovery community have had to really struggle against that for a long time, that not everyone who goes the same path has the same sort of recovery. And, thankfully, both your experience in PTSD and mine in recovery, we're evolving. Some of these ideas are finally evolving, but unfortunately we weren't starting at zero. We were starting at negative something and building back up because there's so much misinformation that we have to dig through.
Yes, I think that was well said. Sometimes I believe that what we try to do is out trauma people. I think that's what everybody is saying. I'm trying to tell you about my story, how I was laid off 8 times. And then someone's like, well, my father lost it all in the Great Depression and he never, so we always, instead of really listening and hearing, and that's why I love doing this. I love what I do. I love the show. I love to be able to hear things from different perspectives, which is exactly what Jay was saying. My experience and what Ron was saying, everyone, is that it's going to be different, but I should be allowed to have that experience. Jay, one of the things I wanted to ask you is, you mentioned several times addiction, and whatever you want to share or not share is fine, but how do you go from a past with addiction to a focus on mental health?
That's a wonderful question. So very briefly, because my story is not the one you've heard a lot, and so to really explain it, it's convoluted, but essentially I was misdiagnosed as a teenager with this pretty severe struggle with mental illness. Turned out that it was just a chemical thing because I was on a bunch of meds already. And that went on for about 10 years. Like Ron, I'm unfortunately a suicide survivor. Fortunately, I'm a survivor. Unfortunately, that was an experience. I'm also an overdose survivor, went to rehab and all that kind of stuff. So my story combines both mental health and addiction, and also the way that we are now approaching addiction on a much more global scale is through the mental health aspect. It's not one for one, but almost one for one. Someone who struggles with some sort of a substance use disorder also is going through something with mental health. And so separating the two, which is what we did until pretty recently, doesn't really make a lot of sense. The best ways to deal with someone struggling with substance use disorders is by also combining work with mental health, so behavioral health work.
Excellent answer. I'm glad I asked that question. One of the other things that I've seen come out of this, aside from the caring and the people being more genuine, is it's like an incubation period where people have just become that much more creative. Guests on the show have talked about how they use the time to learn how to bake bread or learn lessons, or they've written that book they've always dreamed of. They've written screenplays. Music has come for them. Alissa, have you seen any creativity that has come as a result of being quarantined?
Yeah, for sure. I'm very fortunate, both I grew up in a household of professional musicians. So every day it's like we got a garage band jam session, and I have been writing a lot, and I have been inspired to work on my craft a little bit more. But I also want to point out, we see all these things online. People learn how to make all these home cooked meals, and writing that album and doing it. But I also want to point out, like, it's okay if you're not doing that, because I've seen this. I don't even know what they call it, like this quarantine inspiration, and it's like, if you're not in an okay place to be creating and you don't have to feel like you're productive and you're changing the world during this time. And I feel like we all feel like that kind of pressure, that we have this time to dedicate to doing all those things that we never got around to doing. But honestly, no one's in the right mindset right now. Nobody's okay. Nobody is nobody is how we used to be. And I think it can be a fine line, because you don't want to be making these irrational sort of huge decisions based on what is a temporary experience. I think there are good ways to occupy your mind and to, like you said, to be creative, to improve yourself, but don't feel like you need to be, writing the next great American novel, because not everyone is in that place mentally, and that's okay. Like, it took a good couple of weeks of me just mourning, the loss of my job and my lifestyle, and kind of, okay, what do I do now? Before I could even sit down at a piano. It took me a few weeks to get there, and I think that timeline is going to be different for everyone.
Yeah, I think that was beautifully put. I think there is sort of a spectrum, right, of people who launched straight into something new. And that was what I did, because I lost my ability to go out and speak and do all that stuff. And so I shifted into the podcast. But there's also a lot of people, one of my brothers, I'm the oldest of four, and one of them, who's a teacher, kind of went, you know what, I really want to use this time to just center, to just relax. And so if he's on the other end and I'm over here, we're all somewhere on that spectrum, and it's okay to be where you are. If you, like you were saying, if you are ready to do your big thing that you want to do, that's wonderful. If not, and you just want to focus on like my wife is doing a bunch of watercolor paintings because it's so relaxing and it's so soothing. And is she, going to be the next Picasso? No, but does it make her smile when she sits down and does it?
Don't kill her dream.
Hey, I love my wife. I love her painting. She described her bird she painted yesterday as a potato. So it's what makes you happy more than thinking that, as you said, to write the next great American novel. So embrace what you're ready to do, but also embrace that time to relax. This is, yes, you may not have your job right now, and it's really hard, but also, as I think you were saying before, Alissa, this may be the last time that ever is true in your life as well. Exactly. So find yourself on that spectrum.
Was your wife doing the watercolors before COVID-19? No, this is a serious question. Like, before that, or all of a sudden was she hit with the inspiration to try something new?
A little bit of both. She was doing some sort of visual art, and she read that watercolors is the most soothing of the artists. So she said, yeah, why not? I'm going to try this. And she's been loving it.
Oh, beautiful. Ainsley, what has your experience been like on that spectrum?
I mean, honestly, at first it was recentering myself, and it was kind of a nice reprieve. Because it's like, wow, you know, look at all of the little things that maybe we took for granted, that now it's like there's silence on the home front of the world right now. And it's the first time that everyone is really, I feel like, connecting with their families and connecting with their roots, whatever that may be, and their true selves. So for me, at first it started off like, wow, recentering myself, being with my family, playing games with my family, and cherishing that time, because there may not be another time like that in the future, because, you know, life and work and it has its normal buzz and routine, and we just are so focused on our goals. But then it honestly threw me into propelling myself and applying myself and being a content creator and being like, you know what, I want to create positive, inspirational messages and, you know, writing and focusing on things that maybe I threw to the wayside before. And for me, that has been my outlet, just applying myself and being like, hey, let's be the change we want to see in the world and be the reason someone smiles today. Like, even if it's that little thing, right, that you put out there or that you put out on social media. So it's been a little bit of both. It's been a recentering time for me, but then it's also been a time of application to myself and content creation. So
I love it. I think that's great. I want to go back to something that I believe was just magical and something that Alissa said. And I've seen this over the past year because I speak to a lot of people. That's one of the things I do, whether it's interviewing business owners, the talk show, being a business consultant. And what I've seen as far as a trend is people who just simply say, and that's okay. And I think that's just magic. I think that's just beautiful, because I think we tend to judge people and we say, you should be here, you should be doing that. How many podcasts have you done this week, Jay? You've done 5, you should have done 10. You know, how many songs have you written, Ainsley? You should have written more.
Right.
You know, Ron, you've spoken to 12,000 people or 30,000 people. Why aren't you talking to 60,000 people? You know, but now, you know, we look at Alissa and we judge her music and how often have you rehearsed? You know, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. But we've seen a trend now to just simply accept people where they are and say, you know what, whatever you're doing, however you decide to show up in this world today as you, that's okay.
exactly.
I think so. Really great point about that is one of my favorite podcasts and radio shows is Fresh Air on NPR. And the other day, she was interviewing this amazing leader. I don't even remember his name, but the sound quality was god awful. And it's because they were interviewing each other over Zoom from both of their dining room tables. And they put it out anyways, because that's where we are right now, where normally I'm sure they would not have released that interview. I mean, the sound quality was that bad, but we're all just going, you know what? We understand where you are right now. A good buddy of mine started a podcast right around the same time I did called Cookies for Breakfast. It's hilarious. He's a comedian in Chicago, but the sound quality is only okay. And occasionally he'll jump on in the middle of an interview and go, sorry guys, this is just where we are right now. And I love that positivity. I love that message, because it's so important, a reminder of you don't need to be perfect right now. You just need to do what's going to make somebody smile, what's going to make you smile.
Amen to that, Jay, 100%. And you know what? I feel like this is the time, in whatever you're doing, whether it's podcast, music, whatever your life has taken you, it's about not being a perfectionist, as most artists are and most people are. We have a certain standard that we hold ourselves to, right? That certain bar. And I feel like it's a time for releasing the perfectionist mindset into an authentic reality, and being authentic and genuine with people and real, being like, hey, this is me. I'm not perfect. I fumble on my words sometimes. I'm not always going to put the best sound quality out or have the best lighting, but you know what? I'm going to make the best out of it. And we got to be authentic and real and vulnerable with people, for people to be vulnerable with us.
For sure. I could not agree more. So on actually next Tuesday, the April 14th, I'm doing an online concert. Somebody recommended that I host one, and I was like, okay, that's a cool idea. You know, get my mind, get back to performing, distract people a little bit. And then I had more and more people, you know, writing to me excited about this concert. Some people from the alumni associations at my school, people, you know, sharing this. And then I started freaking out. I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is just going to be like in my living room on a webcam. I don't have I'm not going to be on a stage or like have a sound guy and I like freaked out, you know, like, what are we going to do without, you know, these, you know, professional hairdresser, like makeup artists, wardrobe, like, how am I going to put on a concert? And then I realized, like, everybody's well aware that I'm just in my living room doing a show. Like, they completely know that that's the reality of it. In fact, it'd be concerning if it was anything else at this point, if it wasn't just, and I think, like you said, we just got to let that go, that perfection, that of, even though, you know, when we're on stage, it's a performance and we want it to be this grand, elaborate, you know, perfect sort of thing. That's just not happening right now. We have to work with what we're given. No matter what your industry is, no matter what job you're in right now, we all just have to work with what we're given, and we got to let go.
That's what I'm doing right now, because I planned this show around the 3rd of March. And I was like, I want to do the round table. I want to do it, you know, and I'm so used to being exactly what Alissa was saying, the camera ready. You know, my hair is always done. I put on my makeup. I'm ready to do a show. And then right before I actually launched the show, I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I can't go get my hair done. I can't go get my nails done. You know, so I said, you know what? It's going to be okay. That's really what I did. I said, you know, the ponytail is going to have to work, the bun, whatever it is, I'm going to do the show, and whatever happens. Now, we are coming down to the last few minutes of the show. And what I like to do at the end of every show is just allow my guests a moment to speak a few final words to our audience, to everyone who's watching live, as well as everyone who's watching in the archives. So we're going to start with Jay. Jay, give us some few words to take us out.
Well, thank you so much for having me today. This was wonderful. It was great talking to all of you. And I definitely would love to talk to all of you offline as well. Try to get you on the podcast, the Choose Your Struggle podcast, where we talk about mental health and addiction. Thank you to everyone who is listening and who reaches out. Look, it's okay to feel the things you're feeling right now. If you need someone to just listen, I'm here. You can find me on Facebook or LinkedIn at Jay Schiffman. The Next Schiffman, Schiffman on Instagram, or JB Schiffman on Twitter. My website is jschiffman.com. Really looking forward to talking to anyone who wants to talk about mental health and addiction. I love it. It's what I live every day. As you can see, it is my thing. And remember to choose your struggle.
Yes. So I looked through my emails, Jay. I looked through my Facebook. I looked through my Instagram. I think somehow I missed my invitation to be a guest on your podcast.
You just got one right now.
Okay, I'm gonna be on the show because I want to talk about that. My family, I have people in my family who suffer from mental illness, so I can definitely relate. And I always tell people, this is one of those statements that may get me in trouble, is that I have never been diagnosed with a mental illness, but I'm crazy. So just know, you know what I mean? So just know.
Save it for the podcast. I'll get you on there. We can talk about it.
Yes, let's sit down and have that conversation. Ainsley, a few final words from you.
Of course. And first of all, Jay, congrats on your 10 years. I believe you said congrats on that.
10 years this month. So yeah, big.
Man, that is a huge
congratulations.
Thank you.
So congrats to you.
Thank you.
Honestly, it's been such a pleasure being on this show and talking about life and real things that are happening in the world today, and just being authentic with each and every one of you. Like, thank you, Jay, thank you, Ron, thank you, Alissa. Y'all are all incredible in your own right, and I love the standpoint and views that you have and outlook on life. You can keep up with my journey on music and acting and all of the things in between, jack of all trades, that I do at Ainsley_Ross, at AINSLEY_ROSS on Instagram, and Facebook, Ainsley Ross the artist. Keep up with my journey there. And you know what? Just keep being brave, keep being authentic, and know that it's okay that you aren't perfect. And so just truly be yourself and be that reason that someone smiles today, whatever that may look like for you. Keep being the change that you wish to see in the world.
That is beautiful. I'm about to cry today. Like, this is one of the most emotional shows that I have. And every Monday I send out the newsletter, and I include the videos, and I ask people to watch. And I try not to give preferential treatment. That's like my thing in my life. Whenever I say I love you to someone, I'm like, okay, I can't just say I love this person, because then that leaves everybody else out. But this has really been an amazing show, and I hope everyone tunes in, not to take away from any of the other shows or the other guests. This one has really affected me emotionally. Oh, Ron, I know you're going to hit me in the heart. So if I'm over here crying, just ignore
He
it.
gets us all. We're all gonna be crying by the end of this.
But I think the best thing I could leave everybody with is I want just to share. I mean, I'll give you a website you can go to. Sometimes people think, when I've been interviewed sometimes by reporters in the past, they think this journey is about me. And I said, what part of this is about me? I needed to meet people. I needed to get out in the world and connect. 4.5 years ago, you guys, I wouldn't have done this. I didn't want to be around people. I was ready. I was just waiting to go. I mean, to take my life by suicide someday. So for me, I'm going to share a website. It's BlakeLateShow.com. If you go to Instagram, it's at Blake Late Show. And it just gives people the chance to see people I've been meeting on this journey, because one by one, all of you guys you've changed my life. I'm here today. And literally, that wasn't guaranteed 4.5 years ago at all. So it's just my way to share back with people and someday people are going to be able to see all these tens of thousands of stories and messages that people have put on these boards. They put them in 94 languages. They signed them in 27 Sharpie marker colors. So it's just, it just shows you how unique everybody is. So I think that's the greatest thing I can do, is just share how amazing people have been. And so far around Mexico and the United States as I've traveled with this journey. But yeah, if people wanted to go to BlakeLateShow.com to check out the journey, and a documentary that was made about this, a group of 3 journalism students followed me around for 3 months. So the beauty of that is they allowed the world to see this whole journey, like what has been going on. So I feel like that's the greatest gift. And that's during COVID-19, we're in this together. And I think that's what we need to realize. So thanks for letting me share, you guys. Like I said, you're the first people that I've engaged with today. So the pressure was on you guys to start my day. But you guys started it off for me. And so I'm going to go eat breakfast after this. So thank you guys. I appreciate it.
No, thank you. That really, again, affected me emotionally. And when you were speaking, what I kept thinking about is that this show, and we all laughed about it prior to the show, but this show had the most technical glitches out of any show. Like, I haven't had technical glitches, but 2 of the guests were unable to get logged on. We had to get them on. And then I'm like, we're ready. Let's go live. Tried to go live on my Facebook fan page, and it didn't allow me to go live, but it allowed me to go live through my personal account. And I was like, you know what? Sometimes I'm too deep. I always look for meaning, but the meaning of this for me was that this show was so personal. Everybody was so vulnerable. They were willing to speak and to share. So maybe that's why I wound up on my personal account, but it has definitely been an emotional show. So we're going to allow Alissa a moment to take us out.
Yeah, well, I just want to say, thank you so much for having me. It was amazing to have a conversation with 4 strangers today, which is something 2 months ago I would have totally taken for granted, and that's just not a luxury we have in the reality that we're living in right now. So I think every single one of you have such an inspiring story. So thank you for sharing that with me, but also thank you for sharing that, with the world, because there's so many people that need to hear that message. And I feel honored and blessed to, I've made 4 new friends today, which I can't say everybody's doing these days. Definitely a thing. But if you want to keep following me, you can find my music online and on Spotify, iTunes, Apple Music, whatever the kids are using these days. And with my name, ALISSA, and then my last name, MUSTO. And I can be on social media platforms as well.
I love it. And I'll tell you one thing that you have is a gift of simplicity. That's a gift. You said I made new friends, and that was the epitome of why I created the roundtable and why I invite people to share their social medias. If nothing else, we made some new friends this morning. I think that's the most important thing. So I want to thank you all for joining me today, for being guests on the show. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate
You are so welcome. And I definitely have to thank everyone who caught the show live on my personal page today. Thank you for everyone who's watching it in the archives. I appreciate everyone. But I'm going to ask you to support the show, support our guests. Each of them have their links in their website in the description. please visit their websites. Please connect with them. Most of them gave their social media during the show. Follow them, support them, interact with them. Let them know that you saw them on the Round Table Talk Show. Share this post, and we will be back after this weekend where I think I'm just gonna, let some emotions out this weekend, but we'll be back on Monday at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Everyone have a blessed and a safe weekend. Bye now.